Daniel Levy always, I think you're not going to get a better sort of broader sense in some ways of just of what's really happening on the Israeli side, what the strategic picture is, and how all of these pieces fit together. I think Daniel Levy is really, really essential for actually understanding what's going on. And he worked for Ehud Barak. He worked in capacities for previous Israeli governments, and he's very committed on this issue. But he also has a background in anti-racism work, right? And I think that a lot of what comes through here is really, is frankly jettisoning racism around the Palestinian people. I think when racism is genuinely dropped on this issue, it can't be talked about in the same way. And then the other thing is, and it's absolutely right, anti-Semitism, and we've seen attacks on synagogues in Europe, some of which have been affiliated with Palestine solidarity activism. There is Jew hatred. There is anti-Semitism. It is one of the most poisonous crimes in human history, and that's the needle to thread. I mean, I felt very proud of that commentary I did, saying, don't cheapen anti-Semitism. Don't use it as some disgusting parlor trick to distract from the actions of a blunderous, human rights violating, strategically inept Netanyahu government. But by that same token, yes, if you're going to engage in this issue, you do have to recognize the distinct history of anti-Semitism as a force in history and being attentive to it. Not because there's some fantasy about Israel getting wiped off of the map or any of this nonsense, but because anti-Semitism is a real thing, a real threat that has obviously affected and killed and ended many, many, many lives. And we need to drop all of this nonsense, all of the racism, all of the anti-Semitism. I mean, that really, I would say, of my soapbox for a second, someone asked me if I boiled it down what my politics were, and I said anti-racism and economic justice. And, anti-racism would be a shorthand, obviously, for anti-homophobia, being opposed to anti-Semitism, anti-sexism, anything. You cannot dehumanize groups of people. And there's geostrategy and there's all these complexities around this issue. But there's some mentality that says, well, Hamas is this, so we can rain this down on Gaza. There's a mentality that says we're doing everything we can to protect civilians in Gaza. That is demonstrably not the case. Okay, you can say whatever you want about Hamas. And I've said many things, including people who give me problems about that. Give me that I won't say, oh, Hamas has a pass for everything because they're fighting for an oppressed people. They don't. That's not what I believe. I don't believe being in a position of being occupied and oppressed and blockaded gives you a right to shoot a rocket at a civilian. I don't believe that. That's not my value system. But if you are saying that, and many people, including people who write into this show, come so profoundly close, if not just directly say, well, they're in Gaza. They must have played some role in electing Hamas. So therefore they can be killed. Therefore they can be bombed into oblivion. When I walk the streets of Brooklyn or Queens or Manhattan, I will think this, if you put gates around it, and it was at a beach edge, and there wasn't flowing products and movements, and two closed borders, and there was bombs raining down on it, and soldiers coming in, and this school wasn't safe, and this place wasn't safe, and there wasn't an area, even one that was supposedly under international auspices, that could still get shelled. A UN school was shelled over the weekend, and it is so appalling that the U.S. State Department said it was reprehensible. Okay, that is where it's going. And that's frankly where it's been. The impunity of this. And there must not be anti-Semitism in any type of Palestine solidarity work. But people must get really serious about the fact that the only way, and especially I want to speak very specifically to a liberal audience, There's nothing special about this story. Anytime one group of people engages in mass human rights violations, they have a narrative that explains why that's okay. The South African apartheid government said if there was non-racial based rule, that Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress would slaughter white people, reclaim their land, and turn South Africa to a bloodbath. And it was a genuinely held fear. And I'm not equating. Look, the African National Congress is a pretty special organization. And it ain't Hamas. I think Hamas is disgusting. But you think that the ANC didn't kill people? You think that the ANC didn't engage in industrial sabotage? They had an armed wing. They had the Spear of South Africa that was created by Nelson Mandela, Ronnie Kasrils. It's a Jewish member of the ANC, as a matter of fact. And you can go to Sri Lanka, the Tamil Tigers. Yes, they're a terrorist organization. I think if you engage in suicide bombings and targeting civilians, you can be classified as that. Does that mean that the Sinhalese government had a right to carpet bomb Tamil areas, engage in systemic human rights violations? If you were told and explained this situation and you did not know the terms Jewish and Palestinian, and you knew the basic dynamics of it, would you attempt to justify what's happening? I'm sure you wouldn't. And it's only by working through this and being real about the underlying realities behind it. Because, you're pushing it into a situation where, yes, it's like, what, do the Palestinians want to make peace? Do they feel great about this? They don't have freedom of movement anywhere. They're co-opted in the West Bank. They're blockaded and bombed in Gaza. And you have to be real about it. So I was going to do a little bit more of a formal update, but I went on a little riff there. And I'll tell you, too, there's a final thing. That whole threat about, not making distinctions between these groups. I saw someone on TV saying that Hamas was the same as Boko Haram and the same as Al-Qaeda. That's not accurate.
At all.
Like, that's just not
close.
That's not thinking. That's not formal thinking. You need to be able to go. If I said, Netanyahu's the same as Idi Amin, okay? Like, that's ridiculous. That's not accurate. That's not cogent thinking. And you're laying the groundwork for what would happen if a group like ISIS ran Gaza. What would that look like? Would that empower voices inside Israel that are getting more comfortable calling publicly for genocide and ethnic cleansing? We have to get very serious about answering these things and addressing them fundamentally. And that's going to include very uncomfortable decisions for everybody. But endless excuses and endless toleration of these types of actions just because we have decided that one group of people is essentially subhuman is not only morally unacceptable, it's politically beyond stupid. If your main issue of concern is the well-being of Jewish people in the world, and if you have a particular care for Israel, you should be the first person on the street against this. And you should be the loudest voice against these policies. That's all there is to it.